Welcome to Talking Points. Our question today is, how much influence does President Trump have over Minnesota elections? Who better to talk about that with than GOP analyst Amy Frederiksen, the former Minnesota Senate Majority Leader. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me. This is great studio.
Right. It is wonderful.
Yeah, comfy.
I really think that people are underestimating President Trump. Even though his poll numbers are falling, I still look at some of the endorsements he's made, that he's gotten two incumbent senators, John Cornyn and Bill Cassidy, by endorsing a primary opponent. The primary opponent has won. What do you think is going on in Minnesota? What are you hearing?
Well, okay, so I think that people are perhaps underestimating Trump's let's call it influence, power within the GOP party, which is still as strong as ever. And I think it's inarguably stronger than ever. I think there has been one primary where he endorsed where someone lost, one big primary.
Yeah.
One, that's it. Otherwise, he has run the table. And as you said, he's won against seated incumbents in like long-time seated incumbent Republicans. I think the story is different when you talk about a general election. Okay. And so the primaries, of course, are Republicans coming out and voting for who they want to see on the ballot. Now, we have one coming up in the governor's race. We have a big one coming up. It's a three-way primary between Kendall Qualls, who got the Republican endorsement at the convention, Speaker of the House, Lisa Demuth, and Mike Lindell.
Right.
To this point, the president has not weighed in.
Right. Well, he did say back in December that, quote, Mike Lindell deserves to be president. Or to be president. He deserves to be, not president, deserves to be governor. I don't...
very offhand, though,
And Lindell will be the first one to say, hey, that wasn't an endorsement.
Right.
Right. But it can't hurt.
Well, so I think, and we're going to kind of dig into the candidates. I think, if Donald Trump would come with an endorsement in that race, it would weigh heavily. I don't know that it would absolutely be the final say in that race, but in a race for a three-way Republican run, for a primary where it's going to be Republican voters, it is going to be always a very low turnout. That's just what it is. And it's a real base race, right? It's not just kind of everyday Republicans. Most folks aren't paying attention that closely. Right. So what you have is like kind of party faithful, people that feel very strongly about the primary race that come out. And in that way, of course, President Trump is going to have a big impact should he weigh in. I don't know that he will. I think he probably won't. But should he weigh in, he would have an impact.
Well, let me ask you about the polls, because our friends at KSTP did a poll, and then there's some internal polling that all had Mike Lindell in front of Lisa Demuth and also Kendall Qualls. Do you think that's accurate, or do you think it just reflects the MAGA base here in Minnesota?
No, I don't even think it's the MAGA base. I think what you've got there is name ID. I think that's what it reflects. In fact, I'm certain of it. Mike Lindell spent years and years and years on TV as the My Pillow guy. He's been very vocal, and so if you're looking at I'm a big fan of Speaker Demuth, and Kendall Qualls has run in the 3rd District, and he ran for governor last time. He did not get the endorsement. This time he got the endorsement. So both of them have some name ID, but I think people would be shocked to know how very few people actually know you if you are Speaker of the Minnesota House.
So how many people does Lisa Demuth, if we went out in the street and asked, do you know who Lisa Demuth is? You're saying a lot of people wouldn't know. And I agree with you.
But how many people would know the My Pillow guy? A lot.
Just a lot. A lot.
And so that is really... One, it's hard to poll primary people because you don't know exactly who's going to come out for a primary. So you try to dig in down to who voted in last primaries and that sort of thing. But really, that's reflective of name ID. Now, that may be all it takes, right? I mean, again, think back to Donald Trump and what was it, a 7 or 8 or 10-person race that started out when he first ran for governor in 2015. And he sort of cleared the field because he just kind of kept that strong 16 or 17% he had, and everybody else was divided, and he had name idea, people knew who Trump was. And
Right.
he was bombastic and interesting.
Well, is it name ID that Lindell has that puts him in this kind of front runner status, or is it the fact that people associate him with the president? They know that he has worked with the president before, that he's appeared with the president.
I think it's name ID.
You think it's name ID?
I really do.
You know, I question that. And the reason I question it, I was really startled in the Republican convention when there were 3 candidates left: Lisa Demuth, Kendall Qualls, and Mike Lindell. Mike Lindell was 3.
Mm-hmm.
He had to drop out. He had about 24%. He drops out and he says, I want all my votes, all my supporters vote for Kendall Qualls, or vote for Kendall Qualls, not Lisa Demuth. And they all did. They all did what he said. And I'm like, is that name ID, or is that maybe people thinking that it's Donald Trump speaking through him?
Well, I mean, I shouldn't speak. I guess some of those very like hardcore internal Lindell people perhaps see that. Yeah. You know, I think that, frankly, the president has distanced himself from Mike Lindell. You don't see them together. You don't see him endorsing. If he was his guy, if he really wanted to, he could have come out ahead of the endorsement and gotten that to Mike Lindell. So perhaps there's a small number that think that. I just don't see the evidence of it, because certainly the president is not shy when he wants to endorse him. He endorsed Ken Paxton, an attorney general that he felt very strongly for in Texas, who he was a big supporter of, over the seated John Cornyn, U.S. Senator John Cornyn. And he's not shy
Paxton
about
had been
taking
previously indicted, all kinds of controversies.
Right. He's incredibly controversial, and the president endorsed.
What are you hearing about the governor's race? I mean, what are people saying? Are they gung-ho about Lisa Demuth, or gung-ho about Kendall Qualls, or gung-ho about Mike Lindell?
It depends on who you're talking to, right? There are definitely factions in the party. Certainly for, obviously, as we've seen, Mike Lindell has, 20% of something of a vote that's very gung-ho about Mike Lindell. I think Speaker Demuth has more vocal, strong support than Kendall Qualls. I feel like it does feel like that Kendall Qualls got the endorsement because of Mike Lindell throwing his support, right? It doesn't feel like, and that's not support for him. That doesn't translate to primary voters.
I think it was literally that 22% all went to Kendall Qualls.
Right. And Speaker Demuth was leading all of them for 4 ballots, 5 ballots, or whatever it was. She was in the lead. So I feel like hers is stronger and Mike Lindell's is stronger. Like if you're a Speaker Demuth person, you're a Speaker Demuth person. If you're a Mike Lindell person, you're a Mike Lindell person. The real question for me is, how many of those folks still go and vote for Kendall Qualls? And unlike an endorsement where you have multiple ballots, the primary ballot is only one.
Only once.
Only once. So you don't get to go back and go, oh, Kendall's in third. I'm going to go throw my vote to Lisa Demuth, or I'm going to go throw my vote to Mike Lindell to not waste it, to make it count. You're just going to vote for the person who's in third.
I don't think Lisa Demuth seems to be getting credit from the Republican base for being in the legislature and dealing with all those machinations that you have dealt with. You have been there. You've seen the sausage being made. And it's not easy to come to any kind of agreement. You've got to get a balanced budget on certain years. Why is that?
So this is fascinating to me, because there's just this attitude, and I think Kendall Qualls tapped into it by saying, I'm nobody. Okay. One, Republicans, you have not been in charge and had the governor's race won since 2006.
Right.
For 20 years. Yeah. So maybe you should start thinking a little more strategically about who can win.
Well, he is a successrun businessman. Yeah. He was in the Army, Marines, I believe.
Yeah. No, but I'm saying but he's run a couple times. He's lost a couple times. Like at some point, maybe we need to move on to somebody else. And I don't understand. I don't understand that. And also there is this idea that any experience, and I'm one that would say, serving 10 years, serving 20 years, after a certain amount of time to open up the seat for somebody else. I really think that politicians stay too long and too late. So I'm not defending that. But Speaker Demuth hasn't been there. I mean, I stepped out in 2013. She was elected in 2014. She's not been there but a handful of years. And in that time, she has very quickly risen in the ranks out of respect from her colleagues. She was elected speaker
Right, that's
by
what I'm
her
saying.
Republican colleagues who know her best and know how she was voting. And those are not a bunch of like namby-pamby.
Yeah.
Like those are like Republican-based folks.
Is that translating, though, into people votes?
It is, and obviously we saw that because she was leading in the endorsement. Right. But will it translate enough? And there is just this like sort of anti-establishment, even for someone who has not been establishment and hasn't been for a very long time. And also there's this like sort of lack of like any kind of recognition that, if you actually want to win in negotiations, maybe you want someone who's been in negotiations, right?
Right.
I go back to 2011 and the budget shutdown, right? So that was Governor Dayton who had won in overwhelmingly, and then two Republicans, the House and the Senate were both Republicans. And so we were kind of headed for, and we had a $6 billion deficit, and we were sort of headed for that inevitable collision, right? Because
not
he
a
wanted
good
to raise
time.
he ran on raising taxes, and I had the Tea Party folks that were saying absolutely not.
Yeah.
So we went rounds. We went into the longest shutdown in state history, 21 days. I can remember when Governor Dayton finally said, "Fine, I'm not going to raise taxes." I mean, you would think that for Republicans should be the win, right? Like, oh my gosh, you won. And in fact, I remember, folks will remember Rush Limbaugh. Yeah. And Rush Limbaugh went on his radio show. And at the time, John Boehner and President Obama were squaring off. And Rush Limbaugh went on his radio show and said, hey, Republicans, John Boehner, look to Amy Koch, and I'm Frederiksen now, but Amy Koch and Kurt Zellers, they just stared down the governor. They just showed you how to do it, and he's not raising taxes. Right. So we were used by this conservative icon as an example. But guess what? I got like lambasted by some of Republicans around here that it wasn't a good enough deal, and I've never understood that. I just thought this was and remains since then. The budget has grown to be 40-some%, actually 48% last time, 50, 60%. I don't even know what the number is anymore since I was in office. The smallest bonding bill based only on infrastructure, the smallest budget that we have had in decades. And for some reason, for Republican base around here, they just were unhappy. Yeah, I never understand. To this day, I don't understand it.
It's almost as if in the Republican base, it seems like having experience, having been in the trenches, having to negotiate something with Democrats or the DFL hurts you.
Right, and it's wild because
I think that's what's happening with Lisa Demuth. I'm just surprised that she hasn't gotten more acclaim. Done better in the polls.
67-67 split by any measure. That is an impossible situation, particularly when you've got a DFL governor in Governor Walz and a DFL Senate. So you have one half of one leg of the stool that you're trying to negotiate with. And I think she has done so really well. She has held back all kinds of things. She couldn't get some rollbacks of the stuff in 2023, but you didn't have the votes for that. So considering this incredible, impossible situation, I think she's done a tremendous job. And I just think that there are just some folks that just never want to be happy about that, right? I don't know if they want to be in the seat. But inevitably, I see people that take the seats and they talk really big, and then they get in the seat and they go, "Okay, well, you have to understand." And I'm like, "Well, there you go." So maybe everybody should have their turn and understand what it's really like to be in that seat.
One thing I would like to know is, what are you hearing about the affordability issue? Because that's so big with groceries, with gas, everything. What are you hearing about what people are saying, whether they blame President Trump for it in Republican counties, or are they blaming something else, or they say, well, he's doing the best he can. We need to make sure Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon. What are you hearing? Is he getting pinned with that?
For sure he's going to get pinned with that, and Republicans in general get pinned with that. Sure, the economy is going to be the issue in the end. And now with the latest, what happened overnight in Iran, and with the latest attacks and the president's comments, I mean, I think he's going to try to keep some kind of a peace deal, or at least negotiations through the election, because he cannot have an all-out war wrench again. Gas prices are at $3.69, but that's still incredibly high. And food prices aren't going. And at this point, we're in mid-July. They're not going to go down fast enough, right? And the food prices will not go down because it's in large response to the tariffs, which any Minnesota farmer can tell you is a problem. And so that's going to have an impact. Whether people are talking about it vocally, people are worried. And the response that has come from
I agree with
Washington,
you. I think a lot of people are worried.
Yep. And the Republican response, well, for a week there, the response was, well, maybe you're just not working hard enough, which was a Republican congressman that said that, I think, out of Texas.
Right. Well, the president said he doesn't care, you know.
Right. He said he didn't care. And then his spokeswoman said the same thing, basically. Well, I've worked really hard. Well, okay. All right. So you're telling me the mom that's, waitressing at two different places. Like, don't tell me about working hard, right? So I just thought that was the stupidest lines that could have come out and the most insensitive to it. And if you're feeling defensive about your economy, that is not the response.
But what I wonder is, do most Republicans, you think, places like Meeker County, where the president had these huge, massive vote totals, are people saying that too?
Well, sure they are.
I
think they understand it. I think that the more of them then would be willing to say, but look, I trust the president in his trade and the tariffs are going to have in the end a longer term better outcome. And I do not want Iran to have nuclear weapons, so we have to do what we have to do. There's more of that. But there's still concern, and that doesn't change for folks that just don't pay as much attention, right? Independents, that maybe have been with Trump because they like that he's a business guy and that he can cut a deal and that he says it like it is. Those folks are going to go, "Oof, I don't have any money left in my bank at the end of the month."
Well, I'd like to go back to that. So you're saying that there is a chunk of the Republican electorate that says, yes, prices have gone up. The tariffs are hitting me. I'm really struggling, but I'm going to give the president the benefit of the doubt. Yes. And then the other people, but they're still really worried, but they're still leaning towards the president?
Right. Well, yes, sure. You see that in the polls, right? There's 30-some%. And that's who those folks are. And they just really want to trust in this president. There are folks that just, feel very strongly about the Republican Party. And that's what they believe, right? So that's what you're seeing in the poll. That's why he's got 30-some% approval rating, despite the fact that we were paying $4.29 at the gas pump, right? Like, ouch.
Right. Well, it's not too far from where Biden was when he left office, 40%. There are many people who are wondering why it's not worse. His approval ratings are not even worse.
Right. No, and I think that's interesting. And I think that's a twofold thing. The Democrats are lost still in the woods, which is very interesting to me. So I think that in part the Democrats just don't own, they should be looking at this going, this economy is really, really rough. People are really, really hurting, and still they're willing to say, but not you guys. And maybe the Democrats should take a long, hard look at why that is.
I mean, what do you mean by not you guys?
Not you Democrats. Right?
Okay.
There's still a huge chunk. I'm I'm worried about the economy. I'm deeply worried about the economy. But then I see, Democrats talking about, and doing, things that I cannot get on board with. And I think that, and particularly when you go to independents that are willing to sort of cross-ticket voting, the Democrats have not done their job to convince. They don't really have a message. They've latched onto affordability.
Sort of.
I
think they've sort of. I'm surprised that. I'm just surprised
that they've kind of latched onto it with a socialist edge, which is not where America is or will ever be in a big general sense. No, I understand that there are a lot of progressives that think that, but they're sort of beholden to their very, very base progressive voter, and that's the way they're going, and that's who's winning primaries. But that's not a formula for success, and that's just not where America is, which is why you saw the president bring out, instead of talking about he doesn't care about the prices, saying we're not going to be communists. Now, they'll say, well, we're socialists, not communists. Well, nobody cares about the difference.
In Minnesota, I think it's really interesting that two of the most progressive candidates that are out there, Ilhan Omar and Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan, will say they're not DSA, Democratic Socialists. Right. They are DFL, and they make that case very, very clearly, as if they know that having a socialist label in Minnesota is not going to work. Do you think that's the case?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. They're, even
though they agree, they're aligned on a lot of the issues.
Right. I think they would agree that they agree, right? I don't think they would argue at all that they're definitely the more left progressive wing of their party, for sure. But they reject that label because they want to get. I mean,
Yeah.
especially in the case of Lieutenant Governor Flanagan, she's trying to get elected statewide, and that would never ever fly.
She was
in
a
Winona,
Democratic socialist, yeah.
right? Winona and St. Cloud, much less Eden Prairie and Blaine,
Yeah.
right? That's just not going to fly. So she knows that, and so she's.
All right. I guess I'm wondering. To me, it seems like Republicans are just not as energized and focused as they should be. Perhaps Democrats are not as well. In terms of this primary, where at times 2 years ago we had 12% of the state voted. If you go back 4 years to bigger elections, it's more like 20%, 22%. And apparently fewer Republicans turn out than Democrats turn out in these primary elections. What does that do to things? I mean, how do you get Republicans energized to go to the polls in August?
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult. The answer is it's really, really hard, and especially when there's the issues and the party itself and sort of everything that's going on in the world is pushing back on that. And so it becomes very much about kind of a base race. And that is where, and we kind of go back to our beginning of our conversation, where someone with some name ID like Mike Lindell, could barrel through, right? I don't discount anything here. I think it's a two-person. I really do think it's Lisa Demuth or Mike Lindell. That's my sense, because those two seem to have bases of support that are excited to go vote for them. Yeah. And also, there's money in those campaigns. They can actually mount a campaign versus Kendall, even the party doesn't have any money, so there's not going to be a campaign on that.
And Kendall Qualls does not have any money. The last report, I think, was $30,000 of cash on hand compared to $500,000 for Lisa Demuth.
Yeah, you can't even pay a staffer.
Right. Well, I think Lindell had $11,000, so that's
that's interesting too, right? He's spending his own money, and even still, anything he's collecting, he's like buying his own books and pillows. So I want to ask you. I saw some video of the Delano 4th of July parade, one of the great parades in the state, one of the biggest parades really in the state all year. It's my home parade that I've been going to since I was a little bitty girl.
Well, we got video of all the Republicans were there, and they were kind of walking along, shaking hands. Mike Lindell had two buses with Lindell blazed on them. He was blaring Elton John's "I'm Still Standing," like in a loop, I'm still standing, and he was throwing out pillows to the crowd. And people seem to be going crazy. I mean, does that translate into votes?
I mean, it's certainly an exciting circus, right? And I just think
shades of Jesse.
Yes, but also, I just like, again, and Wright County is my home. I grew up in Wright County. My mom's from Delano. My dad's from Buffalo. But folks, like, don't be bought off by a pillow. That's all I'm going to say. But friends and family, and I'm related to half the town, don't be bought off by a pillow. Choose someone that can actually get something done, is all I will say. Like, think, and I just, in me, I have to believe that there might be excitement around that, but people are just not going to go to the polls and only do that. And we saw that, Donald Trump has solidified some power. Now he's been, a beleaguered president for 2 terms. But even in Minnesota and even in Wright County, the first time he ran in 2016, remember, he did not win the caucus. He came in a distant third in the Minnesota caucus. And I remember going to that caucus in Wright County. I remember seeing the lines and lines and lines of people. This is 2016.
Marco Rubio won.
And I remember going there and going, whoa, is this the Trump excitement, right? Is this what everybody's talking about? Are these people all here to vote for Donald Trump? Because I had never seen the caucus.
This would have been March of 2016 or February of 2016.
Yes, that's correct. Because we did a straw poll.
Yeah.
There's not a vote, but there was a straw poll. And the lines were out. We were at the Buffalo Junior High. That's where the Buffalo one meets. Down the hall, around the corner. I'd never seen participation like that. I was helping to do sign-ups. I was trying to get, because the line was
And this is a Republican caucus.
Republican caucus. And this is the high, this is Trump is new and he's exciting. And I thought for sure that's what I was looking at. And I wasn't. I was looking at a bunch of people turning out to vote not for Donald Trump. Right. So, so I have in I feel like for folks, it's funny in a parade to have Mike Lindell, who's kind of this character, and music, and you're having a couple beers, which I promise you some people in Delano were, and he's throwing out those pillows, which are not even good for your camper. But whoa! Sorry, I don't care for those. I do not care for his pillows. I had a couple for a while. I don't care for them, but in the end, we're not choosing, we're choosing someone to run our state, which, by the way, is in deep trouble, has been left in a real lurch. We're losing traction when it comes to our schools. We are sliding down the states.
The reading scores are slowly coming up, but they're not what they were.
Yeah, after tanking over the last 8 years. So slowly coming up, that's pathetic. The fraud that has been rampant that we have never gotten to the bottom of, we really still don't know what happened. We've never had anybody say.
I think that's completely fair.
Come on, Minnesota Republicans. This is your moment.
I've actually asked that question of Peggy Flanagan, and I think even the governor. I know I've asked her, Peggy. I said, what happened?
No.
What? Why does this keep happening? I mean, how could it possibly happen?
And the answer is,
and nobody seems to really understand. Other states have the same setup where they get federal money for state programs. But I want to ask you, going back to the president, I do think that there is an aspect of his personality that is so commanding that people are just naturally attracted to it. Like, all I could think of was if the U.S. had won that soccer game where they lost, and the president intervened and got the suspended player back on the team, probably Donald Trump would probably have cleaned up. I mean, people seem to really embrace that. And you're talking about 2016. That is true. Marco Rubio won. I remember interviewing Marco Rubio over at the Hyatt.
We're the only state he won.
The only state he won. I mean, next time I interview Marco Rubio, which probably will be a long time, I'll ask him, what do you think of Minnesota? But later that year, 2 days before that 2016 election, it was a Sunday, and I was working my regular shift, and I got off like 12:30 because I come in at 4, and I thought, I'm just going to go see. Donald Trump had scheduled an unexpected visit to Minnesota 2 days before the election.
Yep, he came into an airplane hangar. I was there.
You were there? Okay, all right. Well, I was there too. And what surprised me as I was going out, because I had kind of a late start, was that I saw people actually leaving their cars on Highway 77 and climbing up fences to get into this political rally.
That was the day I knew he would win. That was the day I knew he would beat Hillary.
Right. See, that was the day I thought something's going on. I wasn't smart enough to say, he's going to win. But I mean, it was extraordinary because there was very little notice. There was very little advance, and it was spontaneous, and it was enormous. And Mike Lindell was there, by the way, that day too. He spoke. But I just look at that, and I think that the president has a unique ability to capture people and to capture their imaginations in a way that I don't think a Democrat has, since I don't think even Barack Obama quite got there. But, I go back to Barack Obama's 2012, his appearance at the Target Center, where people were it was like a rock concert. I was like, who is this guy? This is incredible. But what do you think? Do you think that there's anything to that, or am I just off base there?
Oh, no, that's 100% it. So that's funny because to understand, and I've been to a lot of political rallies. I've seen presidents in person, right? I've seen presidential candidates in person before. I knew that day, and in fact, and you can check it because I have it was on my podcast, Wrong About Everything, and we all did our predictions, and everybody said Hillary's going to win because everybody thought Hillary was going to win.
I thought Hillary was going to win.
And I said Donald Trump's going to win. And I knew I had. That rally was like solidified it for me. I was like,
it was amazing because I go to a lot of political rallies too, and it was remarkable. I mean, the energy, the enthusiasm, the passion.
6 people across deep waiting in line. They could not all get in, so then they started forming outside, and they put up, I think, some TVs outside. I don't know. I was lucky enough to be inside.
That's right. They did have this huge outdoor.
Yeah, they had this huge outdoor, and it's all spontaneous, and it's not built around anyone either. So I was kind of laughing as the Democrats. And I thought about this when Vice President Harris was running, right? She had all these big rallies, and people like, look at this. Well, she's headlining with Beyonce and Oprah and all these other celebrities, right? He doesn't have that. Right. He's it. And there's numbers down some, sure. Does he sometimes exaggerate his numbers? Yes. But that is very real. And until you've seen it, and I've been to 4 rallies now,
it's amazing.
It's amazing. You can't.
It's amazing. And these are rallies. You've never seen it
before. I've never seen anyone else garner that kind of like
adulation.
Adulation. And the folks that are there are not just there to like, oh, I'm going to do this and it's a fun day. They are there for Trump.
Right. Absolutely.
For President Trump.
Does he still have that?
I think it's fading, and as anything will, right? Anybody who's served 2 terms, politicians it's like fish, right? It gets bad after years.
I don't know. I'm just not so sure.
I think it's fading, but still for him, he will always have that. And then he does things like he has just a real sense of. Like the soccer match. Every American was talking about, like, really? You red carded him? Like, everybody saw it. Everybody saw, was it Christian that had done the exact same thing and gotten away with it, right? So
Cristiano Ronaldo.
Cristiano Ronaldo had done it and had not gotten red carded. And so we all kind of felt like, what? And you come on our soil and you're going to like do us dirty like that? And then he makes a call and he makes sure that we all know he made a call.
Right.
And he's back in.
Right.
I was very, and you're right, had they won, would the rest of Europe been furious with this?
Yes.
Would the rest of America cared?
No,
not in the least.
Not in the least.
Not in the least.
I still think he has it because it's something that I've really never seen before with anybody, to have that kind of hold over an audience and to speak for. We could go on and on about Trump rallies. He speaks for 2 hours. Right. Without notes,
right?
Way off prompter. I mean, I'm talking way off prompter.
And it's so long. It's way too long. It's really hard to.
But people seem to enjoy it. Well, he has endorsed all 4 Minnesota Republican members of Congress. So Minnesota does have an evenly split congressional delegation. So those candidates seem to be in good shape, don't you think?
Oh, yes, they'll be fine. They're the Republicans. The only seat, I think, in Minnesota, the congressional seat that is a question mark is CD2. That is going to be it's a former Angie Craig seat. She obviously is running now for U.S. Senate. So it's an open seat. There is a really big primary on the DFL side. So that's going to go on till August 11th. And meanwhile, State Senator Eric Pratt has sewn up the Republican. He'll be the Republican on the ballot.
He has no opponents in the primary.
He has no opponents in the primary. He's just out there and running. And that what was so remarkable about what Angie Craig did with that seat is she won it by 14 points. But it was a seat that was like a +1 or 2 GOP seat when she started.
Right.
So not only did she win in a year where Republicans were in trouble. I believe it was 2018, wasn't it? Right, which was the election right after President Trump took over in 2016. Democrats were winning everything. But then she not only built on that, she won it by double digits.
Right.
But that's not a DFL seat. It is definitely a swingy district.
How about the 1st congressional district with Brad Finstead?
Yeah, I just think that overwhelmingly that is a seat that Republicans should never just take for granted. But
the old Tim Walz district.
The old Tim Walz district, right? But Brad Finstead is just such a, he's just lived there his entire life. He's a former ag secretary or former USDA.
He's got 7 kids.
Yeah, he's a former state rep. He's salt of the earth. He really is. He fits that district so wonderful. He works so hard. I think that you've got those, sort of population centers like Rochester there. Yeah. You've got some Mankato. You've got some parts of the district that, are college towns and maybe have a little blue. So you always have to watch it. But I think it's certainly not this year. That's not an actual one. The only one I'm really watching is CD2.
All right. What about the influence potentially that President Trump has just because of that magnetic personality that he has on the legislative races? Because this is a big deal. The entire legislature is up, and it could not be more. I can't believe that the House actually has an even number of people in it, which is crazy because that's why they could have 67, because it's an even number. Most legislators do not have legislatures do not have an even number. The Senate doesn't have an even number. But even that's it's just one DFL advantage.
Right. To put it in perspective, there are 201 legislators in the Capitol.
Yeah.
100 are Republican and 101 are Democrats.
it's amazing.
It's cannot be more evenly split. That's it. That's the numbers. So here's the thing. You know, Republicans.
I mean, are they going to win? Are Republicans going to win in spite of the president or because of the president?
Well, a little bit, you know. Okay, so I think that it's going to be a little tougher row to hoe for Republicans because of the economy and potentially Iran, and frankly, Metro Surge has left a trail in Minnesota. So I think there's some deeper wins. But what I'm looking at when I'm looking at some of those local, you mentioned there's a KSTP poll, there's a Star Tribune poll. Sometimes locally, there's an issue that raises to the level of, like, think about what's happening in Maine right now, right? So
Well,
Maine,
That's
right. Like,
a
there's just
Democratic.
local.
That's a disaster. How do you not vet a candidate?
So, in fact, they did vet him. Everybody knew about this. There's been allegations of this.
Yeah.
But anyway, so but even going back to, so for us in Minnesota, it's the fraud issue.
Right.
And there's sometimes stories or issues that are so big that they actually transcend national politics. Not a lot, because generally that's going. And I'm still watching to see, like, does that, but if you look at those polls internally, independents, which are really that swing vote, right? If you say you have 33%, just roughly 33% Republican, 35% Democrat in Minnesota, the rest of the folks in the middle are independents, and overwhelmingly by 60+% in those polls, they're deeply worried about fraud and they believe that Republicans will handle it better.
Right.
That is a problem for the Democrats. And again, this goes back to, they've just, not only have they never explained it, I mean, Governor Walz stepped down from running for governor for a third term because of it. It was that big of a story. But not only have they never explained it, their answer to it is not good. They're like, well, we passed the OIG and yes, kind of kicking and screaming, Republicans, dragging you to it. Like, and also 8 years too little, so late, right? So that issue potentially is a bit of a unicorn. Factor? Yes, is I think it could be an overriding factor. Or even maybe
Trump factor overriding everything.
Or maybe like a splitting ticket thing, right? Well, like, okay, so I'm going to vote for Democrats for these seats, but boy, at the local level, I'm worried about this. I'm going to hedge my bets and vote, which Minnesotans also tend to do.
Yeah. What do you think this will be the year that Minnesota Republicans finally win a statewide office? They haven't won since 2006 and Governor Palente's second term. But do you think this is the year it's going to happen?
So there is the potential for that.
For statewide race.
Statewide. But we have a real ability to tromp all over that and choose the wrong candidates. And if you choose the wrong candidate, and we saw this in the last race, by choosing Dr. Scott Jensen, who's a nice man, but he had no business running for governor. He had very little name ID. Twice. He ran this last time. He ran a terrible campaign, and he lost by 8 points. In that, we lost the House and the Senate in a trifecta, not by a lot of votes, by a couple. We lost the Attorney General, which is a statewide race, by 0.8%, and we lost the state auditor, who nobody even knows, and basically a generic ballot, by 0.4%. And it can be directly attributed to the numbers that the top of the ticket Scott Jensen got. You cannot lose. He lost by 8 points. If he had lost by 4 or 5 points, he could still lose, and you could have won. We could have won the House or the Senate, or we would have won the AG and auditor for sure. You cannot have that heavy of a drag on the top of the ticket because there are just enough people. There are some that split tickets, and there are others that just go, well, I'm voting Democrat, so while I'm here, I'm just going to vote for all the Democrats.
Well, haven't Republicans done it to themselves again with that convention?
Well, with
the governor's race?
Well, this is what I'm saying. They inevitably go, and they think that in that moment of time, what they're feeling is the choice, and it's just not. And I get it. Like I always, my first speech at the Senate was, Thomas Jefferson quote: "With matters of style, I flow with the river. With matters of principle, I stand like a rock." I think that they really want to stand like a rock. But there's still the matter of style. And if you are not at the table, if you have not held the governor's seat for 20 years, you're not at the table. You're not making any decisions. And you can see what happens so you have a DFL. So we end up with another DFL trifecta. Republicans are not in charge of anything, and they don't have any say anything. And then Minnesota Republicans, you kind of have nobody to blame but yourself.
Do you think that this could be the year that they finally win a statewide office? Republicans
They could. It depends on who comes. It really a lot depends on this primary, in my opinion.
In the primary. Okay.
In the primary.
All right, and we haven't even touched on the U.S. Senate race, but that's going to be very interesting too, and that depends on the primary, both on the Democratic side and the Republican side.
Yeah, there's another shot there, right? But you have to have the right candidate, and so.
Well, I guess it's all about the right candidate because, boy, you can have the wrong candidate these days.
And
it's
people
unbelievable
don't,
how that
people
keeps
don't even
happening.
want to hear it, right? They don't want to talk. We used to, at the conventions, and I went to lots of them. I chaired a state convention in 2008. We used to talk about electability. They don't really talk about electability anymore, but it's important.
Right.
How can you raise money?
Lisa Demuth does try to talk about it.
She does because she's right.
Yeah.
But more and more folks have just sort of like abandoned that, and this is what you get: 20 years of drought.
Well, listen, Amy Frederiksen, thank you so much for coming in. It's going to be really interesting. I just think that Republicans should be in a better place right now in terms of the polling, in terms of their candidates. I'm just surprised that they aren't a little further ahead. I think it's the president's going to bring them up to that. But who am I? You know,
Right.
Just a reporter.
Well, it's interesting, and again, the Democrats have not been putting forth inspiring things.
Yes.
But they're sort of relying on, well, Republicans will trip over themselves enough, right? The Republicans will say, hold my beer.
And maybe they will.
And maybe they will.
Okay. Thank you so much, Amy Frederiksen. That does it for this edition of Talking Points. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Esme Murphy, WCCO News.